Hey guys, it's Courtney and welcome to day number 1 of our kit week. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Pink and Main kit, and before we take a look at what's inside, we're going to go over some of the subscription details. So this kit is $34.99 plus shipping per month, and it is a monthly charge that you are charged on the 10th of each month. They do ask that you subscribe for a minimum of 3 months at a time, but you can cancel or skip a kit if it's something that you're not interested in, or maybe something that maybe just not in your budget for that month. Now, some of the benefits of being a subscriber is that you do receive a welcome gift with your very first kit. Also, you'll receive a 15% discount in the store on all Pink and Main products. And on your 1-year anniversary, if you subscribe for an entire year, you will also receive another free gift. So now that that's done, let's take a look at what is inside this month's kit. Now, keep in mind that every month is obviously going to be a little bit different, but this will give you an idea of what you can expect when you get your kit. So you can see the kit comes in this nice box that you can kind of keep all of your contents in, and we do have some tissue paper wrapping everything else in the kit. Now each kit will come with this card here that gives you the name of the kit as well as all the contents of the kit along with a color palette. All of the contents of the kit, with the exception of the cardstock, comes in a zipper bag, and this is heavy duty. This isn't any throwaway mesh bag. This is something that you'll want to keep, maybe not for your kit, but for later use for something else. Now for the cardstock, we have several pieces of cardstock here, and they all go along with that color palette. Some of these are regular smooth cardstock, others are textured, and along with the colored cardstock here, we also have 2 pieces of white cardstock. So next we're going to take a look at everything that comes in this bag here, which is lots and lots of stuff. First, we have a button here, and this is pretty much the name of the kit. It says love on it. We also have a package of sequins, and there's lots and lots of different colors in here, and this is also by Pink and Main. We have some ribbon. We have 5 different ribbons here, some patterns, and 1 solid color. Next, we have a 6x6 paper pad, and these are all double-sided. There's lots of different patterns in here, and again, they all go along with that cardstock that comes in the kit, and also that color palette that's shown on that little card along with the contents of the kit, so everything will match very nicely together. So we have 2 of each in this paper pad here, and like I said, they are double-sided, so you get a huge selection. So next we have 4 white A2 size envelopes. These are obviously perfect for our cards, and I like to stick to white envelopes because they match everything. Next, we have some enamel dots, and some of these are circles, some of them are hearts, and they are all different sizes and all different colors. We have a die set with some hearts and the word love, and that also comes with the shadow of the word as well. We have some chipboard stickers, and I love the font on that love, and I absolutely love that tree. We have a stencil with some falling dots, stars, and hearts, so you can use all 3 or maybe just 1. And we also have the stamp set, which coordinates well with the dies as well as the chipboard stickers. And this month we have a free gift. Now, Michelle is amazing. If you don't know Michelle, she's the owner of Pink and Main, and she's absolutely amazing, and she likes to throw in some goodies sometimes. So we have some wood veneer embellishments as well as some glossy enamel hearts here as just a little added bonus. All right, so let's go ahead and make some cards with this kit. Okay, so for my first card, I'm going to be using the stamp set, the die set, as well as one of the pieces of pattern paper and the pink cardstock. I went ahead and cut the word die with the pink cardstock, the shadow with white, and I used a stitched rectangle die for that pattern paper. Now these are huge. This is a huge word, so it's super easy to line up with that shadow. I'm taking a piece of white cardstock to cut just a little bit larger than that stitched rectangle die. Whenever I have a panel on a card base, I like to layer it either on black or white, depending on what it is, and this will really make it pop off that card base. I went ahead and adhered the pattern paper with the stitch rectangle die down to that white piece of cardstock, and you'll see that I have just a teeny tiny bit of a border, and this will really make it pop off that pink card base that we created. And this pink cardstock is from the kit, and it's definitely thick enough for a card base. So for the word die, I went ahead and used my wet glue again to adhere that to the shadow. I prefer to use wet glue for this because it gives me a couple of seconds to kind of shift things around if needed. But like I said, this is such a huge word that it's super easy to line up. For the rest of my sentiment, I'm taking one of the little strips that I had left over from cutting down that one white panel there, and I'm taking one of the stamps from that stamp set and stamping that out with Dull Pink Ink by Simon Says Stamp, which closely matches the pattern paper. I didn't stamp it straight the first time, so I just flipped it over and re-stamped that, and then I'll adhere that down again with my wet glue, and this will go across the entire card panel, not the card base, but the card panel itself. And once that was straight, just using my grid mat there to make sure that it is straight, I'll adhere my large word die kind of at an angle. Now, whenever I have a word die like this, to add a little extra interest to it, I like to add a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of shine. So I went ahead and took a Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen to just add some sparkle to the word itself, not the shadow part. And to be quite honest, it's probably easier to add it before you adhere it to the shadow. But like I said, this word is so huge, I didn't have much of an issue. Once that was done, I am going to take some glossy accents and I'm going to go directly over that word. Now, I'm not really squeezing the bottle too much here. I'm kind of just letting it flow on its own, and I'm just using the nozzle to kind of spread it out as I need to. With a tinier word, with a smaller word, you may have a little bit of an issue, but for a large word like this, it's pretty easy to spread out. If you do have any areas that kind of fall off those letters or kind of squish off those letters, I just take a craft knife, or you can take any kind of like a pick tool and kind of just scoop that up and put it where it needs to be. But that is it for card number 1. Moving on to card number 2, I am going to be using the stamp set, and I'm going to be using this large tree, which is 2 separate stamps. So I'm working on a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock here, and I'm first going to stamp out the branches and the tree trunk. And this card panel is cut a little bit smaller. It is cut to 5 by 3 3/4. For the branches, I'm going to go ahead and stamp this with khaki ink, also by Simon Says Stamp. I didn't want anything too dark. Now, I did let this sit for about 5 minutes before moving on to the next step. Even though dye ink dries to the touch immediately, it's not totally dry. So if you're doing any embossing, make sure that you let it sit for a couple of seconds. Next, I'm going to take the hearts, or what are supposed to be leaves, and these kind of fit right between the branches. So it's fairly easy to line up. And then I'm going to go ahead and treat my card panel there with my anti-static tool, and then stamp this out with some Versamark ink. Obviously, we are going to be doing some heat embossing, but we're going to be doing things a little bit different. So I have 3 different embossing powders, all by Wow. And I'm going to use all 3 on these leaves, or on these hearts on the tree. So 2 of them, one of them is like a bright pink, one of them is kind of like a pale pink, and then I have the gold pearl, which is my absolute favorite. But I will link all of the colors below. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with this darker pink here. And instead of sprinkling this on from the jar, I'm just going to take and pinch some all around. And I'm only adding a tiny, tiny bit. In fact, you can't even tell what the image is at this point. But I am going to flick off any remaining that's kind of just sitting there into a coffee filter. I'm going to do the same thing with this next lighter pink. I'm just going to kind of pinch some of that color on, and again, just tap off any excess. Now, you want to make sure that you're using a clean coffee filter for the next step, because you will definitely want to dump back any remaining, but I'm just going to use that gold pearl and sprinkle that on any areas that Versamark is still shining through. So here you can see that I have 3 colors of embossing powder. Now it's hard to see right now until you heat it up. So you want to make sure that you have your heat gun heated up for about 30 seconds or so before bringing that to the paper. One of these is kind of sparkly, so I did have some excess kind of sitting off to the side. I just brushed that off with my finger, and then I went ahead and heat set that. And you can see now that we have 3 different colors here, and some of them are metallic, some of them are pearl, and some of them are sparkly, and they work so well together. So in order to assemble my card, I am going to go ahead and adhere this down to my pattern paper here that I have cut down to just, well, this is an A2 size card. However, I adhered it completely crooked. So I ended up having a small white border on my card base as well. It wasn't intended, but it's an easy fix if you adhere it a little crooked like I did. But I do like to adhere this down to my card base or my other panel, whatever I'm using, before I stamp the sentiment, because I do have some warping on my card panel. So whenever you have some warping, kind of adhere everything together before moving on to your sentiment. It will give it a little bit of stability and some, yeah, I guess you could say stability, and in order to kind of lay flat so that you can stamp out your sentiment. So once I had all 4 sides finally even, or at least even to the eye, I'm going to go ahead and adhere this down to my white A2 size note card. And again, I'm just going to have a teeny tiny bit of that white showing, which I'm completely fine with. I'm going to take one of the stamps from that stamp set, and this time I'm going to go ahead and stamp this with Hollyhock ink, also by Simon Says Stamp. I figured this matched the pattern paper pretty well, and I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that in the top right-hand corner. I wanted my image to be the star of the show here because I think it turned out beautiful, so I used one of the smaller sentiments. And that is it for card number 2. And once you kind of move this around, you'll see all of that shine picking up from the light. So moving on to the 3rd card, we're going to go ahead and bring out the stencil. And like I said before, this has 3 different sections, one with falling stars, falling hearts, and falling dots. I guess you could use that for snow. But I just want to be using the hearts here. So I have another piece of white cardstock here, and I'm taping this down with some Post-it note tape so it doesn't shift around as I do my ink blending. And I'm also going to mask off that one side just so that I don't go off the edge with my ink. And once you do that, it's pretty hard to get rid of. So I'm using 2 different colors of Distress Oxides here. I'm using Squeezed Lemonade and Picked Raspberry. I'm using 2 different blending buddy brushes by Trinity Stamps, and you can use any blending brush here, but these come to a point, so it's easy to get in small little areas. I started off with the yellow and just kind of scattered that around in kind of some random areas. Then I'm going to go in with the Picked Raspberry and fill in any remaining areas. And then finally, I'm going to go back to that Squeezed Lemonade to kind of get these colors to blend a little bit. Once that section was done, I want this to go across my entire card panel. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick up my stencil, being careful not to move that ink around. And then I'm just going to go ahead and line that up directly next to the part that I've already ink blended. Again, tape that down with some Post-it note tape, and I am masking off both sides this time so that my ink blending doesn't get onto those stars. So I'm going to do the same thing, first starting off with that Squeezed Lemonade, then moving on to the Picked Raspberry, and then I'll go back with that Squeezed Lemonade to get those to blend. And you'll see that I'm tapping off on my scrap piece of paper in between, just so that I don't have too much ink on my blending brushes. So once all of my ink blending was done, I realized that I didn't want to do any more, but it didn't totally reach the other side of my card panel. So I did end up having to trim this down just a little bit on that one side, and to kind of make everything even, I also trimmed a little bit off the top and the bottom as well. So once that was done, we are going to go ahead and adhere, or kind of put the card together. And this time I am going to be adding a ribbon, a bow, and one of the chipboard or cardboard, I think they're called chipboard stickers for my sentiment. So I'm going to go ahead and use this pinkish purplish ribbon that is part of the kit, and I'm going to go ahead and cut off 2 pieces, one that will be wrapped around my card panel and one that will be for my bow itself. For the first piece, I'm kind of just making sure that everything's lined up perfectly, or at least appears to be lined up. And then I can flip my card panel around or flip it over, add a little bit of adhesive to both sides and stick that down. Now, I don't wrap this all the way around. You certainly can, but you're not going to see the back of it, so I don't bother. For this next piece, I am going to go ahead and create a bow. Now, I am not a professional bow maker here, but what works best for me is to not tie the knot first. Just start with your little loops and kind of just keep playing with it back and forth. Pull both ends, pull the little loops, pull the little ribbons that are hanging off, just to make sure that everything is laying the way you want it before cutting off any excess, because once you do that, it's kind of hard to kind of perfect it after that. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this up with a glue dot, and this will kind of keep everything in place. You can certainly use wet glue or whatever adhesive that you prefer. And I am going to go ahead and adhere this a sentiment from the little stickers that come in the set. Now, these have quite a bit of dimension, and they do have backing. A lot of the chipboard stickers and things like that don't have the extra backing, and to be honest with you, they're not really all that sticky. That is not the case for these. You do not need to add any additional adhesive with these. They stick pretty good right from the beginning. So I kind of played around with the placement here and ended up moving my bow off to the left-hand side and adding my sentiment off to the right-hand side to kind of even things out. The bow doesn't, or the ribbon doesn't match my ink perfectly. I probably should have picked a different color ink, but it is what it is at this point. Now, for the life of me, I can't find my fun foam anywhere. I've been reorganizing my craft room. I got a new desk. So of course, instead of just popping the new desk where the old desk was, I felt the need to reorganize everything. And in the meantime, I have misplaced my fun foam. So I'm going to go ahead and use just regular old foam tape on the back of my card panel and then line that up in the center of a white A2 size note card. That way I have a border on all 4 sides. You do definitely want to pop this up because that ribbon that's kind of flapped over on the back of the card panel is going to add that dimension anyway, and you don't want any bumpy areas. So that is it for this one. Next card, we are going to be using 2 of the pattern papers as well as this orange paper and one of the hearts from the die set. And this is the one that has the little opening. So it basically cuts a frame of a heart and the inside of a heart. And I'm just going to be doing some basic die cut inlay here. This is going to be a super clean and simple card. Now, I have a piece of white cardstock cut down with a stitched rectangle die, and I am going to go ahead and adhere all 3 of the little, I'm going to call them frames because that's kind of what they look like to me. And again, I'm using my grid mat to make sure that they're lined up the best I can get them. And I like to adhere the 2 on the edges and then save the middle one for last. That way I can kind of make sure that I have even spacing in between all 3 of my little hearts. Now I'm going to kind of mix things up and take the middle, but I'm not going to match them up. So they're going to be different patterns from the frame in the inside, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to pop these up with some Scotch foam tape. I did cut this down. You could certainly use a little foam dot or whatever, foam square, whatever you have in your stash. I just cut my Scotch foam tape. So I popped those middle pieces or middle hearts right there in the center, and then I adhered another one of those sentiments, those stickers, right there on the bottom. Next, I'm going to take another piece of that orange cardstock. Again, I just cut this just a teeny tiny bit bigger than my card panel itself. Again, I like to have just a little bit of color. This makes it really pop off the page. And then I'll adhere this down to another white A2 size note card. And of course, I have the glossy accents out. And if you guys have ever watched my channel before, you know that I'm slightly obsessed with the glossy accents. So I added a little bit of shimmer to just the inside of the hearts as well as the glossy accents to add a little bit more shine. Now, glossy accents does look a little bit cloudy in the beginning, but as it dries, it does become completely clear, and you will be able to see the sparkle from the Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen underneath it, or whatever shimmer pen that you decide to use. To finish off the card, I'm going to add a few of the enamel dots that also come in the kit, and I'm going to be using the smallest little dots, not the hearts. And I'm just going to scatter 3 of those on the bottom of the card panel underneath the sentiment. And again, no extra adhesive is needed for these particular enamel dots. They are super sticky. I had a hard time getting them off the acetate, but that's good because that means they will stick nicely to your card and will not come off in the mail. So that is it for the 4th card. Moving on to the 5th and final card, I'm going to go ahead and bring out that tree stamp again. And this time I'm going to go ahead and stamp both parts of this stamp with Fade Out ink by Ink on 3, because you really thought that we were going to make it through a whole video without me touching my Copic markers. Not the case. So I'm going to be doing some no line coloring with this particular stamp. So these are solid images, but you can certainly do no line coloring with them. So again, I just lined up the top portion of the tree or the leaves and went ahead and stamped that with the Fade Out ink as well. And I am working on a piece of Nina Solar White. So I'm not going to show you all of the coloring. I'm going to kind of speed through this a little bit because it is a little bit repetitive, but I am going to start off with my E30 markers for the trunk and the branches of the tree. I am starting off with my lightest color just to get the paper saturated a little bit, which is the E30. And then I'll move on to the E37 and just add my very darkest areas. And you can see that I'm just barely touching the tip of the marker to my paper. And the only real dark shadows that I'm putting on here is where 2 branches either come together or they kind of split into 2 one branch splits into 2. So basically the corners would be the very darkest. And then I will go ahead and blend that out with the E33, and you'll see that I'm using a lot more of the E33 now. I'm kind of extending these areas out even further and adding even more shadows. So you don't necessarily need to add all of your shadows with your very darkest color. You can certainly continue to add shadows with your mid-tone colors as well if you don't want them to be quite as dark as the others. Next, I am going to go ahead and bring out the E31, and I'm pretty much doing the same thing here. I'm just going to extend these areas out even further and add a little bit more shadowing, and I'm leaving very little space for the E30 because it is such a light color. Now the Fade Out ink does exactly what the name of it says it does. It kind of fades into your coloring, so you are not going to be able to see your stamped image at all once all of your coloring is complete. But because the E30 is such a light color, I did use that pretty sparingly. I did end up adding just a little bit more of that E33 just on the trunk of the tree, just because I felt like it was a little bit too light and I didn't get the perfect blend between the 37 and the 33. So I did go back and just blend that out just a little bit more. So once that's done, we are going to go ahead and color in the hearts, and I'm coloring in these hearts the exact same way. So I'm only going to show you 2 of them, and you can kind of get the idea from there. So I'm going to start off again with my lightest color to get the paper saturated to make sure that my colors blend nicely. So I'm going to start off with the R22, and I'm just going to pretty much fill in an entire heart at this point. And then I'm going to add a little bit of shading with the R50, or no, the R89 right there on the tip of the heart, on the bottom portion of the heart, and kind of flick that color up. Blend that out with the R46, then the R24, and then finish off for the top of the hearts with that R22 again. And I will show you one more. And again, I'm not worried about my coloring being perfect and staying in the lines because I can fix that area up once all of my coloring is complete. So this is my favorite red combination. I'm sure if you guys saw any of my Christmas card series, you'll see this combination. You've seen it before. I thought I was done with it, and then I forgot about Valentine's Day. So we are back at these reds. So once all of my coloring was complete, I went ahead and trimmed down my panel on either side so that my tree is still centered, but I have a pretty narrow panel here. I'm also taking a scalloped die, border die from Lawn Fawn, and cut that from that spare cardstock that I had left over. And I want this to match my coloring. So I'm going to take that R46, which is my darkest midtone, and I'm just going to color the edge of this die cut because that's the only part that's actually going to be seen. And that way everything will match perfectly. I went ahead and adhered this down again with my Tombow Mono multi glue. Again, I definitely would recommend using wet glue for this so you can kind of shift things around. As you can see, I didn't line it up perfectly. It took me a bit of time, and that way I have that time to do that with that wet glue. I did fix up some of the hearts where I didn't exactly have a perfect heart with my white gel pen. I definitely do not recommend using a colorless blender whenever you use red or dark pink or dark purples. Colorless blenders do not mix well with those colors, so you're better off using a white gel pen to fix any coloring errors. So once I had that border adhered to my panel, I am going to go ahead and again use my Tombow Mono multi glue to adhere this to my card base, and I adhere this off to the left hand side so that I just have that border on the right hand side. And then I will finish off the card with my sentiment. Again, I'm using that small love sentiment, and this time I'm going to use the lipstick red dye ink by Simon Says Stamp and stamp that right above my little tree. Added some shimmer to some random hearts, not all of them, again, with that Nouveau Aqua shimmer pen. So that is the fifth and final card for this particular kit. Here's a quick look at all 5 cards that we created with the latest Pink and Main kit. I will leave all of the supplies listed in the description box below, as well as the information if you choose to subscribe to the Pink and Main kit. Thank you guys so much for stopping by today, and have a great day. Bye.